Hi.
Hey, Yanina, how are
How
you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Are you seeing me okay, or do I need
Yes.
to do something
Yes, you
different?
look great.
Okay, so do you. You look amazing as usual.
Did you go lighter in your hair?
I did, but I kind of go, it's really what my stylist decides. So I just, whatever she decides, I'm like, yeah, go with it. Let's do it.
That's funny. Well, it looks great.
Thank you.
So, for those that don't know, I have a series on my Instagram and I'm on YouTube called Beyond the Face. And every Sunday, I have an open conversation with women that I find inspiring. And this week, I got so lucky. I was so, like, not shocked, but I was very excited when I was able to ask somebody that I consider a mentor of mine. Her name is Vernā Myers, not Verna, Vernā.
Right?
Yes, and she is the head of inclusion at Netflix. She has her own company called the Vernā Myers Company, and she is all things great. She was on a TED Talk, and I feel like when you've been on a TED Talk, you've made it. Like you are that person. So thank you so much for being a part of this episode. I appreciate it so much.
It is my joy and my pleasure, and I'm glad that I was able to do it too. I have a lot going on, but I really wanted an opportunity to just, to just have to just be with you and all of your folks who are following you, because it's a different audience than I usually am with. So I'm just kind of excited about what kind of questions people have.
Yes. So, like, for those that don't know you, let's say
Yeah.
they've never come across you, they haven't come across your TED Talk. Tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and where you are in today's world.
Okay. All right. So I always think of myself as a Baltimore girl. So I grew up on the East Coast, Baltimore, Maryland, and so much of like my essence is about that, which is like it's pretty scrappy, it's pretty working class, it's very black. And I left there after I was like 18 to go to college in New York and then to law school in Boston, and then I became an attorney. But after practicing for a while, I decided that it wasn't quite the best use of me. And I started doing work on diversity inclusion, because when I came into the legal space, and it's still true, there's just the representation of women of color, of just people of color, and definitely women of color is very low, especially in the sort of private elite firm world. And so I started just working on that issue of how could we change and increase the level of representation. And so I did that in an organization that was like a consortium of private law firms, and I was the executive director. Then I actually kept going and started to be the deputy chief of staff for the attorney general of Massachusetts. And from there, I thought, you know what, I don't think I need a boss anymore. And I started my own consulting practice. So I was consulting to private companies on how they might create environments where they could not only attract people of difference, who have been underrepresented and often sort of marginalized, but also so they could hold them and create those kinds of environments where those individuals could thrive. And I did that for like 20 plus years. And one of my clients was Netflix. And then after coming to Netflix, they just kept saying, you need to come and be with us and help us and start an entire organization within the larger organization. So yeah, so that's my job. I'm the VP of inclusion strategy for Netflix now. I also continue to hold my own company that does a lot of learning, videos and things of that nature. And I really consider myself, just someone who is deeply interested in doing what I believe my creator has set me out to do, right? So just finding my calling and finding my gift and just continuously trying to stay in that space and make life better for other people.
Yeah, and I think there was something that I mean, I love you as a person, but when I was listening to the TED Talk
Yeah.
the other day, something that I really loved is that you show how genuine you are off and on the camera. You know, on your TED Talk, you weren't using other people as examples. You were using yourself when you
Yes.
said the story about the air pilot that was a female.
Yes.
And I was like, that's so vulnerable for you to do, because a lot of people would say, you know, you guys, if you go into this mental state, no, I go into this mental state.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, that was so gold for me, because so many people of such high level, a lot of the times when they do self-help books or any types of teaching, it's all about people do this, or if
Yes.
this person does this, rather than using yourself as the example, which I thought was so amazing and makes it more conversational and vulnerable of a topic.
Yeah.
So when it comes to your career, and obviously you've gone through everything, was there something specific that happened when you were in school that made you say, okay, this is the topic that I need to go towards? Because obviously you said that you saw the lack of representation of not only Black women or of women, but, you know, overall there was a huge lack of it. So did anything happen for you to say, this is what I need to do?
You know, I feel like this is a strange thing to say, but when I was 8 years old, Martin Luther King was assassinated. And he had been like my hero, you know, like you're in school and you're watching him and you're thinking, oh, this man is just so, first of all, his oratory skills were amazing, but my parents loved him, like everybody loved him. And then he was gone, and he was not just like dead, but someone had actually taken his life. And there was something about that experience that made me want to continue his legacy and to actually be a person who was about justice and who's about love and community. And I think that's what kind of propelled me towards law school, because I was like, okay, I could be a lawyer and I could like speak out on behalf of people and so forth. But, you know, Yanina, once you go to law school and you owe a whole heck of a lot of money and you're trying to figure out what your future is going to be, and you also recognize there are things that are in the world that you don't quite understand. And so I chose to go to a private, you know, prestigious law firm to understand the world, to actually help pay off my debt and so forth. But when I got there, I was like, it's not a place that would be conducive to justice or to justice to me, or in the ways that I think about what needs to happen in society. And so that was the thing that made me, you know, as a woman, it was just like incredibly sexist. It was just incredibly, so many different barriers that, you know, I didn't think still existed, you know. And because you're as a person, I'm out in the world, but I'm not inside the corporate world. So it's hard to know that those barriers are still there. So anyway, I think that was that moment, strangely enough, as 8 years old, because I also got blessed in many ways. Because when King was killed, and your listeners are a lot younger than me, so they may not have that sense of what the world was like, but it was almost like George Floyd. It was like people woke up and they were like, this has to change and this is not okay, because there were enormous amount of like uprisings and everything. And so new programs came into place. It sounds very familiar. New money, all of that. In my personal situation, I was like able to go to different schools. I was able to participate in enrichment programs. And so I was sort of a beneficiary of all that sacrifice, and not just King, but all the people who were part of that movement. And so I wanted to give back, and I wanted to be a person who was continuing to make life, you know, an opportunity available to women, to people of color, to folks who have been in, you know, marginalized situations.
And then once you were in that, like you were at the prestigious law firm, you saw that things weren't happening the way you liked it. How were you able to find in that industry, or did you look outside of that industry for mentors? Because at that point, I would think you might get angry or, you know, in disgust of the industry because you see those things happening.
Yeah.
So how do you mentors in that?
Yeah, the truth is there's always some good folks. No matter where you are, there's some good folks. You got to find them. You got to look for them. And one of the things that was great for me is that the conversation about the paucity of attorneys of color in Boston, I was in Boston, started to be like a larger conversation, and I got involved in that conversation. So that's one thing I would say also, like, get involved, because there is where you find some really cool people. And I happen to find these older Black men who were attorneys who had each been in large law firms that were majority white, and they had also decided it wasn't the best place for them, and they had created their own minority owned law firm. So before I left the law, I was like, let me see what it's like to work with these individuals. And they were so great to me because I was almost like a daughter to them, and they wanted to see me succeed. And so they poured a lot of development and opportunity into me, and I am forever grateful for that. So that was one of the ways that the mentoring really blessed me. But also, I want to say that mentors are not always like you. So sometimes we're looking for the person who's most like us to mentor us, and that works. But some of the biggest sort of opportunities I got came from people who were not like me. I mean, yes, these men were Black, but they were also men. And that was very different than the experience I was having. And I had to sometimes explain to them that, I remember one time, one of my partners, Black partners, said, I was like, I don't know when I'm going to get this done. Because, work at law firms, very, very, there's a lot of pressure. And he goes, well, why don't you just do it when you go home? And I'm like, because there's a child there. And I started, I have actually another job when I go home, but I realized he had children, but he also had someone at home, namely a wife, who we're going to do the cooking, the bathing, the book reading, and all that. I had a partner too. He was a doctor. So I don't know if people who are doctors on your thing or they're connected to a doctor, but their thing is always the most important thing. Right. Right. So I still had that second job. And so what I realized is, okay, as men in a male dominated profession, they don't quite understand. But I've also had, oh my God, I have mentors who had been so much older. I have mentors who are white and male. I've had really fabulous like women mentors. So I think the main thing I'm trying to say here is a lot of people talk about it like a board of advisors. Don't get too narrow with where you're looking for that advice. Don't insist that that person be just like you, because they might have something to share with you that you hadn't thought about.
Yeah, I find that most of my mentors aren't in my industry at all. They don't look or act like me. And I think that it also comes from, you learn from people that aren't like you.
Yeah.
If you kind of, if you go to a person that looks like a mirror of you, you're going to have a lot of similarities, but growth is the opposite. It's uncomfortableness, I
love that.
So I think that's why people are like, oh, so who in your industry? I'm like, none of my mentors or the people I ask for advice are actually in my industry. And weirdly enough, I trust them, even though they're not in my industry.
Yeah.
So that's amazing. What about, has anything happened in your career thus far that you've been proud of, that you're like, okay, this is rewarding, this is why I'm doing it, whether it be in Netflix, whether it be for a foundation or a company you consulted for, what was the first moment, I guess you can say, that was the most memorable for you, that you're like, I'm glad I took this stride?
Wow. Well, oh my God, there's been so many. I think my decision to start my own company, like, that made me really proud, because I don't know if you've had this experience, Yanina, but you're like gonna take that jump, right? There's like a little chasm there. You're not quite sure. You got to exercise some faith, and you go to people and you say, I think I'm going to do this. And they're like, girl, I don't know if I would do that. Or you're like, well, what are you going to do about that? Like, I left the law, and people are like, oh my God, you're going to die. I mean, that's the message. You're going to die. You're stepping out. How are you going to do this? How are you going to do that? And what I did, Yanina, is like I went and I talked to a bunch of people who I had seen be successful in their own businesses, and and I asked them to ask me really hard questions. But they were also people who were coming with a positive mindset versus the negative mindset. And so, yeah, I decided that as I said, I don't need a boss anymore. I think I can boss myself. And especially because I'm just tired of men, and I'm tired of like, just being in a situation that I didn't help shape.
Right.
And so when I started my own business and I started getting clients, and I'm not suggesting this as a way to go, but I never marketed.
Yeah.
I always just had word of mouth. And little by every year, Yanina, it grew and it grew. And not only did the money grow, but my sense of myself and my power and, the alignment. You're like,
Right.
this is my thing. It is like
Yeah.
100% aligned with how I see things.
Yeah, I think that a lot of the times, I don't know if I don't want to just generalize it to women, but I think as a person, when you genuinely feel scared, I think many times in my life when I've been scared and I've taken the jump, it's given me the best reward later on.
Yes.
But that moment to jump and do it, whether it's to start a company, to quit that job, to, finally be like, this is what I'm going to do. And it's crazy because you realize that you did the right thing because, like you said, the money starts growing, the people start coming.
Right.
The biggest opportunities I've had haven't been because of my social media or because of my resume or because of my my videos of past hosting gigs or my work or anything. It's been literal word of mouth. I worked with you on this set and you were so kind. I worked with you here and you did an amazing quick job, and that person told this person. Next thing you know, somebody's calling me and I'm like, how did you even get my number? But yay.
Yeah.
And I think
so you
that's
feel like you're in the flow. I call it like in the flow. And the other thing is that one time I was dating this guy and he was like, yeah, it's so weird. People pay you to tell them what you think. And I was like, I never thought about it that way. He's like, yeah, that's a great gig. Like, you get paid to tell people what you think. And I'm like, yeah, that's a blessing. And when people come up to you and they say, my life is different, my life is better. I mean, what else do you want to have in your life but to know that you're impacting people in a positive way?
And then in time, somebody, I don't usually take questions from this, but somebody said something earlier and I wanted to get on that before we forget. When you have positive moments, it's great and it's amazing. But how do you keep the positivity going when things like the George Floyd happen in today's world, when other things that are so injustice are happening, to keep the positive feeling of to continue doing your job, which can be so disheartening in those moments?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question, and it's a really tough thing to maintain. I'm not going to lie. But to me, it's about a choice of where your attention is going to go, because for every horrible thing, there are amazing, wonderful, positive things. Both things exist at the exact same time. So you have to decide, am I going to pay more attention to the positive or to the negative? And I'm not saying you don't acknowledge the negative.
Right.
But like even with COVID, right, which has been horrible, and we have lost so many people, and even the people who didn't pass, they may have some negative implications from that. But constantly every day too, you're like, there's so much to be grateful for. And there's so many things that you learned about yourself during this time, or learned about your relationships, or cause you to reconsider some things or see some things. So both those things are true. They coexist at the same time. Sometimes people think that you get on this positive place and then there are no negatives. It's not that way. It's that you want to constantly have enough attention and intention around the positive that it helps you deal with the things that are not so great. Yeah.
And then, so do you ever, I mean, I'm sure you do because you're human, but what do you do on your bad days? Do you let yourself have your bad days, or is there like a bullet point or a strategy that you go through? What do you do when you do have bad days, even if it's not work related, just as a woman,
Yeah.
as a human, you know, you wake up and you're like, I don't feel the greatest today.
Yeah. I've gotten better at just maybe I'm not going to work out today. Maybe I'm going to sleep in a little bit more. Like maybe I'm going to actually watch a movie, even though I still have stuff to do, because I need to give myself sometimes like just a break, like an emotional break or psychological break. But I also recognize that some things that we do to get a break, and I will say that I do to get a psychological break, maybe what I should just do is just breathe or take a walk or pray, or I try to keep my spiritual practice up,
Mm-hmm.
right? So in my spiritual practice, what I'm feeling is, yes, this doesn't feel good, but it's not everything, right? So these
Right.
are feelings I'm having, but I don't have to let them make it, decide for me about how I want this day to go. So I'm not trying to make it go all day long. Like I'm trying to acknowledge, I'm trying to see where they come from, but I'm not trying to stay in it, because for me, there's not a lot of advantage to staying in it.
Right. I always say there's a very thin line from feeling and being aware of this is how I'm feeling, and allowing yourself to feel for a moment, and then the sulking. It's
Yeah.
such a thin line. If you allow yourself to sulk, you fall in that deep hole and it's so hard to get out of it. One day turns
Yeah.
into three, turns into five, turns into you're having a bad month. And
Right.
then
And then it's like this downward spiral that's happening.
yeah, and then next thing you know, you start seeing things at work. This person annoys you, that person's annoys you. You know, freaking the fork fell and it hit your toe and you're like, oh.
My life is just ruined. Everything is
Yeah, it's like
bad.
my life is going in shambles. And it's like you can't see bigger than that. So I always tell myself, allow yourself to feel, but then get the hell up and come on,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. And
Um,
some friends you have some friends who are like perfect, because if you call them, they're gonna like maybe listen to you whine for a little bit, and then they'll be like, so what are we doing? Right?
right. Or they'll
You
start
gotta
making a
avoid
joke
those
of it.
friends who are like in the pity party thing. Like you can't be hanging out with them too long.
Yeah. I also have those friends that like will be there for me and then they'll start cracking a joke about it. So are you still sad because we need, and I'm like, okay, I can't help but laugh. I'm like, okay, I need to get out of this. But so if you had to tell something to your younger self that you wish she knew then that you know now, what would it be?
Um, a couple of things. There are barriers. It's not like those barriers don't exist, but just don't be part of putting barriers on yourself. There are enough external barriers, right? Don't get in harmony with those exterior barriers. Remember that you really have everything you need inside of you. And for me, first of all, I'm in a place I never expected to be, Yanina. So I think lots of people will have that experience, and then they're like, okay, so I achieved this and I achieved that. Now what am I doing? Right.
Right.
So you're constantly, for me, and I use my hand over my head because I can feel the limitations sometimes that I put on myself. So I'm like always like adjusting up, what more is possible for me but not everybody has to do that. I mean, sometimes I think, why do I keep going up? Can I just be chill with where I am? But that's apparently not my personality. So
Yeah.
that's what I would say. Don't put limits on yourself. Okay. If other people are doing that, that's just the way the world works. But go inside yourself and ask yourself, like, are you imposing limits? Are you believing other people's assessment of you? Because if that's what you're doing, you don't even need exterior people. You're just doing it
Right.
to yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think a lot of the time, especially when trying to achieve such big goals, a lot of the times the little voice in our head, we allow it to become a lot bigger.
Yeah.
And you know how they say live rent free in our mind, and we don't realize that it's
Yes.
actually putting us in debt in a sense, because it's bringing us so down when we have so much opportunities to grow.
Yeah.
I think for sure that would be amazing. And in the book that you wrote,
Yeah.
there was it's 25 uh,
Habits for
25 habits.
socially effective people. Yeah.
So what would you say are the top 5 of those 25, if you
Oh
remember?
my God. Okay,
Or like
one,
just
I mean, yeah, one is just like difference. It's so weird how people say that they're open to difference, but they really are not. And so part one of those habits is like expect difference to make a difference. So I think that's also an issue where people are like, yeah, you're different, but we're just the same. And you're like, well, actually, I need you to do both things. I need you to see my commonalities, and I also want you to see what's different, right? Because I might be having a very different experience. We might be in the same industry. We might even be in the same family, right?
right.
But you're
Hmm.
straight and I'm gay, or you're cis and I'm trans. Uh, you have a brain that works this way. I have a brain that works that way. So even though we're in the same situation, we're experiencing it very differently, right? So that's one thing. Another thing was just like I talk a lot about unconscious bias, like I do in the TED Talk, which is to just I call this. I think I called this chapter. Are you sure he? Are you sure she can drive? Because it's about me hearing the voice of a female pilot on a plane and unconsciously saying, oh my gosh, I hope she can drive when there starts to be turbulence, and realizing that there's often turbulence, but it's rarely a woman. It's almost always a guy, and I'm never questioning his competence. So that was also a piece in there. And then also just like understanding the isms. So like it's not just about are you a nice person and are you kind, which is awesome and important, but there's also a bunch of structures out here that we didn't create and we don't even believe in, but they still exist. And so you could be nice to me, but like as soon as I walk out of the like for our Asian brothers and sisters, right, like during the whole COVID thing and still, right, you're like, really, I'm nice to you. But then when you go outside, you have to worry about someone like yelling at you and maybe even hurting you just because of how you look. So that is a lot about, this xenophobia. So
Right.
that's a system. We didn't create it. We don't believe in it, but it's still alive and well. And so we have to be thoughtful about that. Gosh, I can't even remember all of them. I'll think of some more, but those are a couple of the
Yeah,
examples.
that's amazing. I think like being the more aware you are is the more honest you are, and understanding that it's okay, like you said, to have biases, but it's about being aware of them and shifting them, because it's unrealistic to say that you don't have certain thoughts like that in different parts of your life.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I
I
remember
think.
one of the other habits also was just about like expanding your social and professional circles.
Mhm.
Don't hang out with yourself only, right? So, for example, if I were to like say, okay, you get to invite 10 people to dinner, and they have to be your most beloved people, and not your family, just people who are not your family. Like, who would be at that table?
Right.
Would they look all like you? Would they be different from you? Would they be from different countries? Would they have different languages? Would they have disability? It's like, who's in your circle
Mm-hmm.
and how narrow or wide, broad is it? Who's missing? Who's not? I mean, you don't have to have everybody in your circle, but a lot of the way we understand about how to take care of each other is because we come close to people who are different from ourselves.
1000%. I think I've learned the most from my friends that are from either different parts of the world or different, upbringings than me. And with that, is there anything that you would tell women of today that they need to make sure that they have, I wouldn't say figured out in their life per se, and not even career wise, but is there something that you feel like maybe three things that women should focus on making sure they have in their life? Whether
Yes.
that, anything that comes to mind.
Yeah. So first, I will repeat like a spiritual life, and I'm not trying to say what kind of thing is, but what I mean is like really seeing yourself as part of something larger and really having a sense of yourself and a sense of the oneness that you're trying to achieve, like the wholeness. It's really about being whole. This is so important for anyone, but especially because of women, we tear ourselves apart a lot, and we divide ourselves up into so many pieces, and it makes it hard for us to move in a positive direction because we're like giving out to everybody. And it's like something about a spiritual life makes you realize like it's you, first of all, you have everything you need. You don't have to go get it from other people, but also that you just want to be aligned. I don't think I really understood like the alignment piece, because you have so many things you're doing. They're not all aligned, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you have all this friction.
Yeah.
And then you're holding on to all of these things. So I would also say, and the reason why I think this is specifically important for women is, we get socialized to take care of everybody, to put other people first, especially if you have a kid, man, or if you have a partner, it's like them. But then after a while, you're pouring out things that are somewhat contaminated. They're not pure. They're like, you're doing it because you feel like you have to. And then if people don't come back to you the way you want them to, then you're resentful, then you have regrets, and then you get all jumped up inside, and it's not good. Like what comes out is not good. I got divorced, and I just decided I did not want to be a bitter divorced person.
Yes.
I've seen it. It's ugly. I've seen it. It's not good. It's not good. And it's hard for you to attract. So I was like, what do I need to do, like, to make sure that I'm not a bitter person? And a lot of it was like letting go, a lot of like spiritual work. And then I guess the last thing I will say is, a friend of mine told me this, and it's only true if you really work hard. So I will say that everybody has to work hard, right? And everybody has to have a sense of work ethic and excellence. Excellence, which is not perfection, everybody. Please don't do the perfection thing. That's another thing we do as women. Don't do the perfection thing. You ain't gonna be perfect. Ain't nobody gonna be perfect, okay? We are perfecting ourselves. We are operating on excellence. We're not mediocre, all good. But one of the things that I will say is, if you are a person of excellence, you already know more than many other people who you're talking to. Like if I get freaked out, if I'm going to go, when I was earlier in my career, I would like go in front of like hundreds of people. And one of my good friends said to me, I was like, I just don't know. I don't know if I'm going to do this right. She was like, Vernā, you know 80% more than anyone you're going to be presenting to. And you know that because you're a person of excellence. And so take a deep breath and do your thing. And so that's what I will say is take a deep breath.
I love that.
Do your thing.
There are so many key points in that you said, and I think one of them is I have this tick where I can't stand, and I know that people don't mean bad from it, but when somebody tells me you always look perfect, it makes me irk because I'm like, I am not perfect. I am not trying to be perfect. I am sorry that gives you the idea that I'm trying to be perfect or that I am perfect. I am nowhere near perfect. So when people actually give me that, it like makes me cringe because I try to stay away from being perfect or like seeming perfect because I suffer, like you said, from perfection and being a perfectionist, that I try to stay away from it. So when somebody says it to me, I'm like, I promise I'm not perfect. I'm just trying.
I'm just trying.
I'm
And
like,
I'm
don't put
using
that
my
title
gifts.
on me.
Right. I'm using my gifts because that's what I'm supposed to do. And please don't do that to me.
Mm-hmm.
Because I worry that you're going to, one, try to do that with yourself, or two, believe that that's possible. And what I'd be more interested in is just us knowing each other on a much deeper level. Like, I want you to know that I'm a full person.
Right.
I'm not a picture. I'm not, you know.
Right. I know how to walk into a room and smile, but that doesn't mean I was just battling things outside that door.
Yeah.
You know, don't make me somebody I'm not, because it
Yeah.
might be the most in the kindest way possible, but you're actually, I feel like then they might look up to the perfection of who they think you are to reach that,
Yes.
and you have
They're
no
putting
idea
you
what
on this.
behind that door that brings. Like, I might seem like this, but you don't know what it took to be like this in this very moment, you know? So I'm like, don't ask to be like me, because all that other stuff is gonna come.
Don't get it mixed up, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I love that. And then I think the last thing I would ask to close this out is, what else do you want to do? Is there, you know, you've written
I
books,
love your question.
you've been on TED Talks, you're the head of inclusion at Netflix. Like, this is not some little, like, oh, just the corner store.
Yeah.
You know, like,
yeah.
you've done so many amazing things. You went to Harvard.
Yeah.
You know, so what is next? Does there need to be something next?
Right. Oh my gosh, you're so good. You're like reading my mind. You know, I'm pretty soon I'm gonna go in my closet and I'm gonna do my prayer and my fasting, and I'm gonna lay that question out. Like, what's next? Because for me, I just want to be used to make the world better. And right now, the thing that I see that I really wonder how I might contribute to is this deep polarization between human beings, where they don't recognize that they're deeply connected and that one person's fate is connected to everyone else's. And I want to talk about that. I want to give people opportunities. I have actually gone, this is my I have a third book that I'm working on, but then it just stopped, partly because I took the job at Netflix, but partly because I was just kind of like overwhelmed by how mean people are being to each other over things that, yes, they matter, but like, they are exacerbating the problem by adding so much vitriol to it, so much anger, so much individualism, not seeing the collectivism, not seeing that we are one. And so I just want to figure out if there's anything that I can do to make to take down some of those barriers and some of those things that prevent us from seeing each other's humanity. So that's sort of what my prayer is about right now. And of course, I have family, and I love my family, and I have nieces and nephews, and you know my nephew Eric.
Yes.
And you know, just wanting to think about how to be there for my family as they grow. And you know, we're all getting older. My mom's 91. You know, so that's always. And then I have a beautiful man who I adore.
Yes.
So
Go on lovely vacations with.
Yes, I do.
I guess the one thing that nobody knows, which we can close this out with, is, and I would say is a part of an advice that I kind of gave myself. The way I actually met you was through your nephew. And I remember he reached out to me and he was like, you know, my aunt is moving to LA. Do you happen to know anybody that can be a personal assistant? And, you know, I was busy at the time, but I was like, you know, me. And he was like, wait, you? And I was like, yeah, me. And he was like, you do it? And I said, yes, I'll be a sponge. And I was like, what do you mean? I Googled her. I looked her up. I need to be around her. Any little 5-minute conversation I can get from her, you know? And he was like, are you sure? And I think also as women is understanding that no job is too small as long as you learn from it.
I love that.
And I have been able to learn the most from times where I'm able to put myself in situations around women or men that I really genuinely look up to, or that are so much smarter than me, that I know I can get one little sentence out of them and I'll be able to use that to grow, or, you know,
Love
whether
that.
it's work or personal related. So I'm
I
so
love
grateful
that.
for
And you
you.
are
And
amazing as an assistant, just so excellent, so good, so like on top of things. So I'm grateful that you said yes.
yeah,
And I agree with you, especially these days where people get kind of depressed sometimes. The biggest solution to it often is to connect, to give, and to create something that you an experience that you haven't had before, because it like pulls things out of you and you see a different version of yourself, and you also see how you can give and make things better for people. So thank you for making things better for me. I appreciate
of
it.
course, anytime, whenever you need me, you can just call me. But thank you
Oh,
so much for taking time out of your Sunday, out of your rest day. And I appreciate you so much for being here. I am so happy and proud to have known you, to be able to know you, and to see all your success. So thank
thank
you.
you. Thank you. Keep up the great work, and goodbye, everybody. Thanks for hanging out
Bye.
with us. Bye. See ya.